Welcome to CTV News Trendline with Michael Stittle and Nik Nanos.
And I want to say this to this country's friends all around the world. Many of you have worried that Canada has lost its compassionate and constructive voice in the world over the past 10 years. Well, I have a simple message for you. On behalf of 35 million Canadians, we're back.
Nik, that was Justin Trudeau in 2015, fresh off of his first election victory as leader of the Liberal Party. It's been a bumpy road since then. Our global reputation is something that we're going to talk about in this episode. I want to start with India and the continuing, worsening of relations there. After the Prime Minister raised allegations that the Indian government had a role in the killing of a Sikh activist, a Canadian citizen in British Columbia. You've done some surveys on that.
Yeah, and you know what, Michael, this isn't the first piece of turbulence with the government of India. If you remember, there was like a trip, and I don't think we want to, was it a vacation, a trip, whatever you want to call it, with the wardrobe malfunction? No, maybe not malfunction, wardrobe thing, whatever it is. That didn't go too well. But, right now, with the allegations that the government of India was behind the murder of a Canadian citizen in British Columbia, the Canada-India file has basically just blown up. The good news for the government, there's good news and bad news. Why don't we say that? The good news for the government is that, a majority of Canadians believe or somewhat believe the Prime Minister and the intelligence reports that suggest that the government of India was behind this. That's the good news. The bad news is that, at least bad news if you're the government, that a majority of Canadians would actually like to see tensions diminished or decreased, about 57%, while 26%, only a minority, 1 out of every 4, would like to see increased tensions with India, and another 11% said, you know what, we should be patient and do nothing. So, what's clear is that, Canadians understand that there's a problem in the relationship between the government of Canada and the government of India. They believe the allegations, but they're not hot on being strident and increasing tension with India, and that they're probably more likely to want to see tensions decrease with a greater focus on diplomatic relations and solutions.
And we're still having some fallout from the House Speaker scandal when a Ukrainian veteran who fought for a Nazi unit during the Second World War was invited into Parliament. You also surveyed Canadians on whether that had an impact.
Yeah, who would have thought, Michael, that we'd use the Nazi word in our podcast, but go figure. Anyways, we did a survey, and this had to do with the introduction or recognition of a Ukrainian war veteran who was affiliated with the Waffen-SS, who was recognized, why don't we just say ironically or embarrassingly, at the same time that Zelensky, the leader of the Ukraine, was in the House of Commons. Canadians know that this is a problem. Actually, what's interesting is that 48% think that it's had a major impact on Canada's reputation around the world, 39% a minor impact. 1 out of every 10 or 9% say, hey, you know what? No issue, no impact, no nothing. So, what the key takeaway here is that for an opportunity to showcase the Canada-Ukraine relationship and the support that the government of Canada and Canadians have for Ukraine in their fight against Russia, this was a massive embarrassment and a distraction. Because, hey, Michael, do you remember what was talked about in terms of stuff? Nope. Because what happened was, as soon as this controversy broke, it basically knocked the message that Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government probably wanted to send. It basically punted it right out the door. And the other thing is that it's now associated with the Liberals and Justin Trudeau. If we look at the past, Paul Martin didn't initiate the advertising scandal, but he initiated Gomery. And the more he talked about it, the more Canadians associated the advertising scandal with him and his party and his government. And he lost. And the more Justin Trudeau talks about this, I'm sure he doesn't want to talk about this at all, just wants it to go away. But whenever he talks about this, it just strengthens the connection of the controversy even though it was the Speaker's fault, between the Liberals and what happened.
Nik, I think, most Canadians like to see us as having a global voice for peace, given our peacekeeping record, given all these, recent incidents and the current war raging in, between Israel and Hamas. What is Canada's role now? I mean, what sort of voice do we have?
Well, in the past, it was like, what do we call it? Canada Classic. It's kind of like the Blue Helmet, United Nations and Cyprus and stuff like that, peacekeepers. There's not a lot of that going on right now. And, even when we look at an issue, now the current foreign policy, I shouldn't say biggest, but the current big new foreign policy challenge relates to the conflict between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. The big question is what's Canada going to do on that? There's probably, there are a number of options. There's obviously room for humanitarian support, which is always welcome in these situations that are just tragic on all sides. The big question is would we take, if there was a humanitarian dimension to this, would we take Palestinians as refugees in the same way we took Syrians as refugees? It's going to be interesting to see how the government wants to play this, but it's pretty tricky. This is a very tricky issue to deal with because of the Hamas attack and the implications of that attack and what was involved in that, and also just the general relationship between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
So going back to Trudeau's declaration in 2015 that Canada's back, what's your current take?
I don't think so. Let's face it, we've annoyed China, so we're not on good terms with China. We've definitely annoyed India because we basically accused them of murdering a Canadian citizen. Even countries like Japan, we annoyed them if you remember, during the Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiations, we wanted to, at the last minute, add a EDI component, which my understanding, at least from what I read in the news, annoyed the Japanese because it was a last minute change that the Canadians wanted to see. So, if you take our relationship with China and India and put those on the ropes, we have a positive relationship with the United States. Why don't we just say quasi-positive, because Biden's not doing us any favors. He's focused on his domestic agenda. It's hard to say. I think it would be difficult to argue that Canada is back. I think it would probably be easier to argue that we are having difficulty navigating in this new world where either superpowers or major economic powers like China and India, we have, not just frosty, but negative relations with them.
Nik, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll talk about the issue of housing in Canada and also support for Jagmeet Singh.
Super.
Nik, you do weekly tracking of the issues that matter most to Canadians, and where does housing fit in lately?
Top tier, Michael, top tier. In the latest weekly tracking on the top unprompted national issue of concern, inflation is number one numerically at 18%, followed by housing at 14%. So pretty close between those two. Jobs in the economy at 11%. Healthcare is at 8%. The environment's at 8%. Those have been trending down in the last 4 to 8 weeks as Canadians are increasingly focused on economic issues, with housing and inflation basically being at the top of the list.
I know housing is usually, in the jurisdiction of local governments, provincial governments, not necessarily the federal government, although the federal government can have an impact. All that said, you've also surveyed Canadians on who they trust to best handle this issue.
Yeah, not good news for the Liberals, who are the current government right now. They trail both the New Democrats and the Conservatives on who Canadians trust on the housing front. NDP numerically ahead, but within the margin of error with the Conservatives, 26-25. But, check out the trend line, Michael. The NDP are up 4 points on the trust front compared to before. The other thing that's important to note is 19% say, or 1 out of every 5, I don't trust anyone. And another 6% are unsure. So I guess you roll those up. 1 out of every 4 Canadians say a pox on you all. We don't trust anyone or unsure who to trust on the housing front. But, if the Liberals at 16, they're basically 9 to 10 points back of the other two parties, probably explains why they created this new Minister of Housing, because housing is not a federal responsibility. It's more the focus on the provinces and municipalities, probably speaks to the Liberals wanting to lay groundwork for them to engage on the housing file so that they don't get hammered or are at a disadvantage compared to both the New Democrats and the Conservatives.
Now, Nick, in terms of, major cities like Vancouver, Toronto, et cetera, we're definitely in a housing crisis. There's a lot of people who need homes. I would think that the federal NDP would be front and center in this issue, but I haven't seen a lot of traction coming from that party and taking hold with Canadians.
Yeah, well, the NDP numbers have been they've been decent for sure,
Mm-hmm.
decent and competitive, in the low 20s, which, if the Liberals are in the mid 20s and the NDP are in the low 20s, that's actually not a bad place to be. And the thing is that it looks like the NDP want to firmly focus on healthcare issues, right? They had the dental plan right before that they managed to pass. And Jagmeet Singh has come out of his convention and said that he wants to focus on pharmacare. But hey, we were just saying, when we look at the top unprompted national issue of concern, healthcare is a top issue for 8% of Canadians, and it trails inflation and housing. So, for the New Democrats, I'm a bit surprised that they're not focused on housing, because it could be a natural for them to talk about social housing, helping Canadians pay for the rent and stuff like that, but not so much. It's like they dusted off like last year's plan. There's kind of like it's like the master plan for the NDP. Yes, we will first start with dental care, and then we will go to pharmacare, everything with care in it. And they didn't think, hey, is anybody looking at the numbers? Because pharmacare is last year's issue. It's very important, but compared to what is relevant today, people are worried about paying for the rent in the next 30 days.
And also at the NDP conference, 81% of delegates voted to support Jagmeet Singh and not hold a leadership review. Is 81% on the high side or on the low side of the NDP, and what does that mean for Singh's future as leader?
Hey, come on, Michael. If our kids came home with an 81% on their math test, it would be like an A-.
It would be really good for me. Yeah,
we can't be dissing an 81% score for Jagmeet Singh. Like, I think what it shows is that he has the support of the party currently, and he will be the leader going into the next election. He doesn't have to worry about any grumblings. That said, how many times can the guy not move the numbers? New Democrats elected him with a lot of hope. I think what they thought, and remember, he's from Ontario, came out of provincial politics, he's in the Brampton, Mississauga area. I think for a lot of New Democrats, they thought when they elected him leader that he would help with a breakthrough in Ontario, and specifically in the Brampton, Mississauga, and then pick up more seats. We haven't seen the breakthrough because most of those seats are either Liberal or Conservative. Conservative provincially, Liberal federally. So we haven't seen a lot of movement on that front. I think there's going to be increasing pressure because, for the New Democrats, can I just say they are the least likely to knife their leader? Like, for the Conservatives,
that's fair. Yeah.
For the Conservatives, like, congratulations, you're leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. Let me pull out this knife. Or Liberals have been known to turf their leader. John Turner had to deal with leadership issues, and even Jean Chrétien, who was very successful, politically, both internally and externally within the party, was gently pushed out by the Paul Martin people. So, but the New Democrats, they seem to kind of let their leaders go and go and go, but it's got to end sometime if he can't deliver. And I think this is the election where Jagmeet Singh, there'll probably be more pressure on him than ever to win some more seats. He doesn't have to be the opposition, but just win more seats and punch above his weight politically.
Yeah, the big question is the NDP has this governing deal with the Liberals. It's supposed to last until 2025. Do you think that will still last that long, Nick, or do you think they'll?
No way. No way that's going to last till 2025. Okay. I don't know. I was just going to say it. I thought maybe we'd make a little bet on like me eating a baseball cap or something, eating crow. If the NDP go keep this arrangement alive to the very, 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 very end. And I'll tell you why, Michael, because if the NDP keep this alive to the very end, they're done. Because you can't one day support a government and the next day run against them. There has to be a bit of a cooling off period. So I would expect that at some point, Jagmeet Singh is going to pull the plug on the arrangement, however, not defeat the Liberals or trigger an election. And that he'll want 90 days, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months to dangle Justin Trudeau and the Liberals on a little string. It'll be kind of like, oh, yes, we're not supporting you anymore, and show up to work every day, and we'll tell you whether we're going to support you on a particular bill. Kind of like, what do we call this? Orange water torture, orange juice torture. Anyways, torture, parliamentary torture for the Liberals. And the other thing, Michael, one prediction that I do have is that as soon as the New Democrats do end their parliamentary arrangement without triggering an election, tick-tock, the countdown will happen to an election actually happening.
Nik, I'm definitely not betting against you. And I think we should leave it. No way. I think we should leave it there.
Okay.
Nik, as always, thank you very much.
Take it easy.